The father always put his 5 daughters first, hiding his past trauma from them. But when he ran back into the gas-filled building for one photo, what happened next left the whole neighborhood in tears. Marcus Johnson's hands trembled as he turned the wrench on the old heating unit in the basement of Pine Street housing complex. The metal groaned against his grip, refusing to budge. Sweat dripped from his forehead despite the cold air. The dim fluorescent light flickered above, casting shadows that danced across the concrete walls. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, his voice echoing in the empty space. The wrench slipped, and his knuckles scraped against the rusty pipe. Damn it! His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from the building manager ignoring his request for proper maintenance equipment. Marcus wiped his hands on his gray maintenance uniform and checked the message. "Make it work with what you have. No budget for new tools." Marcus shoved the phone back into his pocket, his jaw clenched. The basement's musty air filled his lungs as he took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The image of his parents flashed through his mind. Their apartment building, the fire, the screams. He shook his head, forcing the memory away. Upstairs, the sound of children playing filtered through the thin walls. His daughters would be home from school soon. Their faces kept him going, even on days like this when everything seemed to be falling apart. His radio crackled. "Mr. Johnson, we need you on the 3rd floor. Mrs. Rodriguez's sink is backing up again." "On my way," he responded, gathering his tools. The basement could wait. It always did. The elevator was out of service again, so Marcus took the stairs, his toolbox heavy in his hand. His boots left wet marks on each step from the puddles in the basement. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. The door was already open when he arrived. "Mr. Johnson, thank God," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her gray hair tied back in a messy bun. "The sink, it's making those noises again?" Marcus nodded, following her to the kitchen. The pipes under the sink gurgled ominously. He'd fixed this 3 times in the past month, but the building's ancient plumbing system needed more than just patches. "I'll see what I can do, Mrs. Rodriguez." As he worked under the sink, voices drifted in from the hallway. His eldest daughter Sarah's distinct laugh made him smile. "School must be out." "Dad?" Sarah's voice called out. "You in there?" "Under here," Marcus replied, his voice muffled by the cabinet. Sarah's face appeared in the gap under the sink. At 15, she had her mother's eyes and his determination. "Mom's working late again at the hospital. Want me to start dinner?" "No, baby. I'll handle it. Just make sure your sisters do their homework." "Already on it?" She paused, then added in a lower voice. The mail came. "There's something from the management office." Marcus's hand stilled on the pipe. "The rent notice." He'd been dreading this all week. "Leave it on the table. I'll look at it later." Sarah lingered for a moment. "Okay, Dad." Her footsteps retreated, and Marcus returned to the task at hand, his movements more mechanical now, his mind elsewhere. By the time he finished with Mrs. Rodriguez's sink, the sun had started to set. Marcus climbed the stairs to their 4th-floor apartment, his body aching from a day of crawling through tight spaces and wrestling with stubborn pipes. The apartment was alive with noise when he entered. His youngest, 7-year-old Maya, was sprawled on the living room floor with her homework. 10-year-old twins Jasmine and Jessica sat at the kitchen table. Arguing over math problems, 12-year-old Angela was helping Sarah cook, despite what he'd said earlier. "Daddy!" Maya jumped up, running to hug him, her small arms wrapped around his waist, not minding his dirty uniform. "Hey, princess." He ruffled her hair, then looked at Sarah. "I told you I'd handle dinner." Sarah shrugged, stirring something in a pot. "You look tired. Besides, Angela's learning to make Mom's mac and cheese." The envelope from management sat on the table, unopened but impossible to ignore. Marcus set down his toolbox and picked it up, his fingers leaving slight smudges on the white paper. Inside was exactly what he'd feared. Rent increase effective next month. 30%. His vision blurred as he read the numbers again. "Dad?" Sarah's voice seemed far away. "Is everything okay?" Marcus forced a smile. "Everything's fine, baby. Just some building business." He folded the notice and tucked it into his pocket. "How was school today?" The girls launched into their stories, their voices overlapping. Marcus listened, nodding at the right moments. but his mind kept circling back to the numbers on that notice. With Linda's hospital salary and his maintenance job, they were barely making ends meet now. The sound of keys in the door made everyone look up. Linda walked in, still in her scrubs, her hair tucked under a surgical cap she'd forgotten to remove. "Mama!" Maya ran to her mother, followed by the twins. Linda hugged them, exhaustion clear on her face. Her eyes met Marcus's across the room. "How was your day?" "Same as always," he replied, the rent notice heavy in his pocket. "Fixing what can't really be fixed." Sarah stirred the mac and cheese one last time. "Dinner's ready." They gathered around the table, squeezing into their usual spots. The apartment was small for 7 people, but they made it work. They always had. Linda took off her surgical cap, running her fingers through her hair. "The hospital's cutting hours again. They're saying budget cuts, but—" She trailed off, looking at the girls. Marcus nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. More bad news they couldn't afford. Sarah got up to serve the food, but stopped suddenly, her nose wrinkling. "Does anyone else smell that?" Marcus looked up, alert. "Smell what?" "Like, I don't know. Something weird. Kind of like when the stove's on, but different." The maintenance man and Marcus recognized the description immediately, but the father in him didn't want to believe it. He stood up, walking toward the kitchen area, taking deep breaths through his nose. Linda followed suit, her medical training kicking in. "Girls, step away from the stove." But Sarah was right. The smell wasn't coming from their stove. It was coming from somewhere else, somewhere in the walls. Marcus's heart began to race as the memories he'd spent decades pushing away came rushing back. The smell before the fire. His parents. The heat. "Dad?" Sarah's voice brought him back to the present. "What is it?" The smell was getting stronger. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Linda, get the girls' shoes." "Now." "Marcus, what now?" His voice was sharper than intended, making Maya jump. The smell of gas was unmistakable now, growing stronger with each passing second. His hands were shaking again, but this time, it wasn't from the strain of turning a wrench. This time, it was from the weight of history threatening to repeat itself. The lights flickered overhead, and somewhere in the building, a child started crying. The crying grew louder, echoing through the thin walls of the Pine Street housing complex. Marcus's ears picked up other sounds now, too. Doors opening, voices calling out, footsteps in the hallway. "Dad, what's happening?" Angela grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "Sarah, help your mother get everyone's shoes," Marcus ordered, moving toward the door. The smell of gas was stronger in the hallway. His mind raced through the building's layout, thinking of the gas main, the ancient pipes he'd been warning management about for months. Linda sprang into action, her hospital emergency training evident in her swift movements. "Girls, shoes on now. Grab your phones." "Nothing else?" "But my homework," Jessica started. "Leave it." Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. Sarah helped Maya with her shoes while Jasmine and Jessica scrambled to find theirs. The smell was getting worse, making their eyes water. Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing 911. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Gas leak at Pine Street Housing Complex, 4457 Pine Street, Oakland. Multiple families in danger. We need fire department and gas company now." "Sir, please stay calm. Emergency services are being dispatched." The line went dead. Marcus looked at his phone, no signal. More crying from other apartments now. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in their doorway, her face pale. "Mr. Johnson." "The smell, it's everywhere." "Get out of the building," he told her. "Use the stairs, not the elevator. Tell everyone you see." Linda had the girls ready, their shoes hastily tied. "Marcus, we need to go." He nodded, ushering them toward the door. The hallway was filling with people now. Families emerging from their apartments, some still in pajamas, others clutching random belongings. "Take the stairs," Marcus shouted to the crowd. "Everyone down the stairs now." The stairwell filled quickly with residents. Maya started crying, overwhelmed by the chaos. Linda picked her up, holding her close. The twins gripped each other's hands, following Sarah, who led the way down. 3 flights of stairs. They could do this. Marcus stayed behind his family, watching for stragglers, helping an elderly man who was struggling with the steps. 2nd floor. The smell was overwhelming now. Someone vomited in the stairwell. Keep moving, Marcus urged. Don't stop. 1st floor. Almost there. The building's front doors were propped open, letting in the cool night air. People streamed out onto the street, gathering in groups, calling out names, checking for family members. Marcus did a head count as his family reached the sidewalk. Linda, Sarah, Angela, Jasmine, Jessica, Maya. All 6 accounted for. He could hear sirens in the distance. Then it hit him. The photo. The only photo he had of his parents, taken the week before the fire that killed them. It sat on his bedside table, the edges worn from years of handling. Linda. He grabbed his wife's arm. The photo? I need to know. She grabbed his sleeve. Marcus, don't you dare. Dad, please. Sarah's voice cracked with fear. But he was already moving, pushing against the flow of people still evacuating. The gas smell grew stronger with each step back up. Someone stop him. Linda screamed. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. 2nd floor. 3rd floor. 4th floor. The gas smell was so strong his eyes burned. Their apartment door was still open. He ran to the bedroom, grabbing the photo frame from his bedside table. His parents smiled up at him from behind the glass. His father in his Sunday best, his mother in her favorite dress. A loud creaking sound came from somewhere in the building. Metal under stress. He knew that sound from his maintenance work. Not good. Marcus shoved the photo into his pocket and ran for the door. The hallway seemed longer now, the gas smell so thick he could taste it. His vision blurred. Halfway down the 1st flight of stairs, he heard a new voice, authoritative and urgent. Everyone clear the building. Gas companies here. Levels are critical. Marcus rounded the corner to the ground floor. A man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway, directing people out. Not emergency services. Someone else. The man spotted Marcus. Sir, you need to get out now. The gas levels, another creak, louder this time. Metal groaning. The building itself seemed to shudder. Run, the man in the suit yelled. Marcus's legs moved on autopilot. 20 feet to the door. 15. 10. He heard it before he felt it. A deep, resonant boom that started somewhere in the building's guts. The floor rippled under his feet. 5 feet from the door, the man in the suit grabbed Marcus's arm, yanking him forward just as the world exploded behind them. Heat, noise, flying debris. They hit the ground hard, the suited man's body partially covering Marcus's as fragments of the building rained down around them. Someone was screaming. Multiple people were screaming. Marcus's ears rang. His back felt like it was on fire. The photo dug into his ribs where it was trapped in his pocket. Dad! Dad! Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Marcus tried to lift his head. The man in the suit was rolling off him, saying something Marcus couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. Lucky to be alive, the man's words finally filtered through. I'm Thomas Harrison. Can you stand? Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure he could. His body felt distant, disconnected. Harrison helped him up, supporting him as they stumbled away from the building. Through blurry eyes, Marcus saw his family running toward him. Linda reached him first, her face streaked with tears and soot. The girls surrounded him, all talking at once, crying, touching him as if to make sure he was real. Don't you ever do that again. Linda sobbed, hitting his chest weakly. Don't you ever. Her words were drowned out by another explosion from the building. Harrison pulled them all back as a fresh wave of heat washed over them. Marcus watched as his home, their home, burned. Fire trucks were arriving now, their sirens mixing with the screams and sobs of his neighbors. The photo seemed to burn in his pocket, a reminder of what he'd risked everything to save. Maya buried her face in his side, her small body shaking. I thought you were going to die, she whispered. Like your mommy and daddy did. Marcus's knees buckled. Harrison caught him before he could fall. I've got you, Harrison said quietly. All of you. We'll figure this out. Linda gripped Marcus's hand, so tight it hurt. Sarah stood on his other side, her arm around Angela, who held the twins who flanked Maya. They watched their world burn together. Behind them, Harrison was already on his phone, speaking rapidly about emergency housing and resources. But Marcus barely heard him. All he could focus on was the weight of the photo in his pocket, the heat of the flames on his face, and the miracle that he was somehow still alive to feel both. The night air filled with ash and smoke as Pine Street housing complex continued to burn. Emergency vehicles' red and blue lights painted the scene in alternating colors, reflecting off the tears on people's faces. Marcus stood with his family, his body aching, watching firefighters battle the blaze that had consumed their home. "Sir, we need to check you out," a paramedic approached, medical bag in hand. "You were pretty close to that explosion." Marcus tried to wave him off, but Linda's grip on his arm tightened. "Marcus Johnson, you let them look at you right now." The paramedic guided him to the back of an ambulance. As he sat down, Marcus could see other families huddled together on the street. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying into her daughter's shoulder. The twins from 2B were wrapped in emergency blankets. Everyone looked lost, shell-shocked. "Any trouble breathing?" the paramedic asked, pressing a stethoscope to Marcus's chest. "I'm fine," Marcus insisted, wincing as the paramedic found a tender spot on his back. "You've got some burns here," the paramedic said. "Nothing too serious, but they need treatment." Thomas Harrison appeared beside them, his expensive suit now covered in soot and debris. He'd been moving from family to family, making calls, coordinating with emergency services. "Mr. Johnson," Harrison said, "I've arranged for temporary housing for everyone at the Marriott downtown. Buses are on their way." Marcus stared at him. "Why are you doing this? Who are you?" Harrison straightened his singed tie. "I'm a developer. I've been trying to buy this building for months, warning the current owners about safety violations. They ignored me, just like they ignored you." The paramedic finished bandaging Marcus's burns. "You should really go to the hospital for a proper checkup." Later, Marcus said, standing up. His legs felt steadier now. "My family needs me." Sarah appeared at his side, holding Maya, who had finally cried herself to sleep. "Dad, Mom's talking to the Red Cross people. They're bringing clothes and supplies." Harrison pulled out his phone, checking something. "The first bus is 5 minutes out. Mr. Johnson, I'd like to talk more once everyone's settled. I think I might have a proposition for you." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion broke out near the building. A woman was screaming, trying to run toward the burning complex. 2 firefighters held her back. "My cat. Please, she's still in there." Marcus recognized her, the elderly woman from 3A. Her cat was all she had. The firefighters were explaining why they couldn't let her go back, why it wasn't safe. The woman's sobs cut through the night air. "The buses are here," Harrison announced, touching Marcus's shoulder. "Let's get your family settled first." Linda returned with a box of emergency supplies. "Girls, come on. We need to go." But Marcus couldn't move. The old woman's cries reminded him of his own mother's screams, the ones that had haunted his nightmares for decades. He reached into his pocket, touching the photo he'd risked everything to save. "Marcus?" Linda noticed his hesitation. "Baby, what's wrong?" He looked at his family, then at his neighbors. People he'd fixed leaky faucets for, unclogged toilets for, listened to complaints from. People who had watched his girls grow up. "This is really happening, isn't it?" Sarah shifted Maya in her arms. "Where are we going to live now?" "Don't worry about that," Harrison interjected. "Like I said, I have some ideas." A loud crack from the building interrupted him. Everyone turned to watch as part of the 4th floor collapsed inward, sending up a fresh plume of sparks and smoke. Marcus felt the heat on his face, saw the reflection of flames in his daughter's eyes. The same flames he'd seen as a child, the ones that had taken his parents. But this time was different. This time, everyone had gotten out. Almost everyone. The old woman was still crying about her cat. "Mr. Johnson," Harrison said, "the buses." "I know," Marcus cut him off. He turned to Linda. "Get the girls on the bus. I'll be right there." Linda's eyes widened. "Marcus, no. No more heroics. Please." He kissed her forehead. "I'm not going back in. I promise. I just need a minute." Harrison looked between them, then nodded. "I'll help get everyone settled on the buses." "Take your time, Mr. Johnson." Marcus watched as Harrison led his family toward the waiting buses. Other families were already boarding, carrying what little they'd managed to save. The old woman had stopped screaming, but her sobs were still audible. He walked over to her. "Mrs. Chun?" She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Mr. Johnson." Mittens, she was sleeping in her favorite spot. "I couldn't." Marcus took her hand. "I'm so sorry. But you know what? Cats are smart. Mittens probably got out before any of us even smelled the gas. She's probably watching us right now, wondering what all the fuss is about." Mrs. Chun squeezed his hand. "You think so?" "I do. And tomorrow, we'll put up signs. We'll find her." A firefighter approached them. "Ma'am, we need you to board the bus now." Mrs. Chin nodded, wiping her eyes. As the firefighter led her away, she turned back to Marcus. "Thank you for always fixing things." Marcus stood alone on the street, watching as the last of his neighbors boarded the buses. The photo in his pocket seemed heavier now. He pulled it out, looking at his parents' smiling faces through the cracked glass. "I made it out," he whispered to them. "I got them all out." The fire continued to burn behind him, but for the first time since he was a child, the flames didn't terrify him. They still hurt, still destroyed, but they hadn't won. Not this time. Harrison appeared beside him again. "Your family's waiting." Marcus nodded, carefully tucking the photo back into his pocket. "Mr. Harrison?" "Yes. That proposition you mentioned. What exactly did you have in mind?" Harrison smiled, gesturing toward the bus. "Let's get everyone settled first. Then we'll talk about getting you a job that actually values your skills." As they walked toward the bus, Marcus heard the old building groan one last time. He didn't turn around to watch it fall. Instead, he focused on the faces of his family through the bus window, tired, scared, but alive. All alive. The bus door hissed open. Inside, Linda held out her hand to him. Sarah managed a small smile. The twins had fallen asleep against each other. Angela was comforting a still sniffling Maya. Marcus took his wife's hand and climbed aboard. As the bus pulled away from Pine Street, he felt something shift inside him. The weight of his past, the fear that had lived in his bones since he was a child. It didn't disappear, but it changed, transformed into something else, something that felt almost like hope. "Dad?" Sarah's voice was quiet. "Are we going to be okay?" Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the photo in his pocket, then at Harrison, who was already on another call, organizing whatever came next. "Yeah, baby," he said, and for the first time in a long time, he believed it. "We're going to be okay." The bus turned a corner, and Pine Street disappeared from view. Behind them, sirens still wailed and flames still burned. But ahead was something new, something unknown. Marcus held Linda's hand tighter and closed his eyes, letting the motion of the bus rock him into an exhausted peace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, they were together. For now, that was enough. The Marriott lobby buzzed with displaced families at 3 a.m. Children slept on luxury couches while parents filled out Red Cross forms. Marcus sat in a plush armchair, the leather cool against his bandaged back, watching his daughters finally drift off to sleep on a nearby sofa. "Coffee!" Harrison appeared with 2 steaming cups. Marcus accepted one, the warmth seeping into his trembling hands. "Must be costing you a fortune, putting everyone up here." "Money's not the issue." Harrison sat in the adjacent chair, loosening his tie. His suit jacket was gone, shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing expensive cufflinks smudged with soot. "The issue is what happened tonight should never have happened at all." Linda approached with a stack of papers. "They need your signature on these, Marcus." She looked exhausted, still in her scrubs from her hospital shift that felt like it had happened a lifetime ago. Marcus signed where she pointed, not really reading the form's emergency assistance. Temporary housing vouchers. Insurance claims the bureaucracy of disaster. "Mrs. Johnson," Harrison said, "please sit. We need to talk about next steps." Linda sank into a chair, her hand finding Marcus's. "Next steps? We don't even know what we lost yet." "Everything," Marcus said quietly. "We lost everything." "Not everything." Sarah's voice came from the sofa. She wasn't asleep after all. "We're all here." Harrison leaned forward. "Your daughter's right. And that's what we need to focus on now." He pulled out his phone, showing them a news website. The story's already breaking. Negligent building management leads to near-fatal gas explosion. Marcus saw his own face in one of the photos, being pulled from the building by Harrison moments before the explosion. The image made his chest tight. Channel 7 wants to interview you, Harrison continued. All the major networks do. Your story. A maintenance man who warned management repeatedly about safety issues, who saved his family and others. It's compelling. I don't want interviews, Marcus said. I want... He trailed off, not sure what he wanted anymore. A commotion near the hotel entrance drew their attention. Mrs. Rodriguez was arguing with a police officer. That's my home. I need to check. Ma'am, the building's not stable. No one's allowed within 2 blocks. Marcus started to stand, but Harrison held up a hand. I've got this. He walked over, speaking quietly to the officer, showing something on his phone. The officer's demeanor changed immediately. Your apartment number? Harrison asked Mrs. Rodriguez. 3C. Harrison typed something. I'll have a team recover what they can once the fire department clears the building. For now, please try to rest. Mrs. Rodriguez's shoulders slumped. Gracias. Marcus watched Harrison handle the situation with practiced ease. You've done this before. More times than I'd like to admit. Harrison returned to his seat. But this time's different. This time, I'm making sure it never happens again. How? Linda asked. By rebuilding. Properly. Harrison pulled out a business card, handing it to Marcus. I don't just develop properties, Mr. Johnson. I transform them. And I need people who understand building from the ground up. Sarah sat up straighter on the sofa. You're offering my dad a job? I'm offering your father a career. Harrison turned to Marcus. You know buildings. You know people. You've been managing that complex with duct tape and prayer for years. Imagine what you could do with real resources. Marcus stared at the business card. Thomas Harrison, CEO, Harrison Development Group. The salary's considerably more than you're making now. Full benefits, of course. And Harrison glanced at the girls. We have an excellent education assistance program for employees' children. Linda's hand tightened around Marcus's. That sounds too good to be true. Mom, Sarah interjected, we can't go back to Pine Street. Not after. A cry from across the lobby interrupted them. Maya had woken up, disoriented in the strange place. Daddy. Marcus went to her, scooping her up. She buried her face in his neck, like she used to do when she was smaller. Baby girl. I'm here. I had a bad dream. The fire came back. Other families in the lobby looked over, their own children stirring. The shared trauma hung in the air thick as smoke. Harrison stood. There are rooms ready upstairs. You all need rest. We can talk more tomorrow? Mr. Harrison, Marcus said, still holding Maya. Why us? Why me? Harrison straightened his tie, a habit Marcus was beginning to recognize. Because tonight, I watched a man run into a burning building to save a photograph. That tells me 2 things. You understand the value of what matters most, and you're willing to risk everything to protect it. He smiled slightly. Those are qualities I need in my company. Linda gathered their few belongings, the Red Cross supplies, Marcus's singed work uniform, the photo frame now wrapped in a hotel hand towel. The twins stirred on the sofa, and Angela helped them up. Room 712, Harrison handed Marcus a key card. I'll have breakfast sent up in the morning. Real breakfast, not continental. The elevator ride was silent. Maya had fallen asleep again in Marcus's arms. The twins leaned against each other, while Angela and Sarah flanked their mother like protective guards. The room was bigger than their entire apartment had been. 2 queen beds, a pull-out sofa, a view of the city lights. In another situation, it would have felt like a luxury vacation. Girls, get ready for bed, Linda said, her nurse's efficiency taking over. Sarah helped Maya brush her teeth. Once the bathroom door closed, Linda turned to Marcus. What do you think? Marcus set the wrapped photo frame on the nightstand. About Harrison? About all of it. Linda sat on the bed, finally letting her exhaustion show. Our home, the job offer, everything. Marcus sat beside her, wincing as his burns touched the mattress. I think. He looked at the bathroom door, hearing their daughters' muffled voices. I think we can't stay at a Marriott forever. The insurance money won't be enough. You know that. Linda nodded slowly. And Harrison's offer? Seems too good to be true. Marcus rubbed his face. But right now, I don't see many other options. The bathroom door opened. The girls emerged in borrowed hotel t-shirts that hung like dresses on them. Maya climbed straight into bed, eyes already closing. We should sleep, Linda said. Tomorrow will be... Yeah, Marcus agreed. Tomorrow would be many things. They arranged themselves as best they could. The twins and Maya in one bed, Angela and Sarah on the pull-out sofa, Marcus and Linda in the other bed. The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Marcus stared at the ceiling, his body aching but his mind too wired for sleep. Beside him, Linda's breathing eventually steadied into sleep. One by one, the girls drifted off too. He got up carefully, trying not to wake anyone, and went to the window. The city sprawled below, lights twinkling. Somewhere out there, Pine Street was still smoldering. Somewhere out there, a new life waited. The photo frame caught his eye, still wrapped in the towel. He unwrapped it carefully, looking at his parents' faces through the cracked glass. Would they be proud of him? Of the man he'd become? Of the choices he was facing? Dad! Sarah stood beside him, her reflection appearing in the window glass. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. She leaned against him gently, mindful of his burns. I think you should take the job. Marcus looked at his eldest daughter, seeing the woman she was becoming. Yeah. Mr. Harrison, he seems different from the other suits. And we need different right now. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. Together, they watched the city below, father and daughter, survivors of a night that had changed everything. When did you get so wise? He asked. Sarah smiled slightly. Must be all those maintenance lessons you gave me. Teaching me to fix things, to look at problems from all angles. Speaking of fixing things, Marcus glanced back at their sleeping family. We got a lot of that ahead of us. I know. Sarah squeezed his hand. But we'll do it together. Like always. Marcus nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. Interviews to give, decisions to make, a new life to build from the ashes of the old. But for now, he stood with his daughter, watching the city lights, holding the weight of what they'd lost and what they might gain in the quiet hours before dawn. Morning hit the Marriott's windows like a spotlight, waking Marcus from his uneasy sleep. His back throbbed where the burns were healing, a constant reminder of 2 nights ago. The room service cart from breakfast still sat by the door, plates half empty with eggs and toast gone cold. Linda was already dressed in borrowed clothes, helping Maya with her hair. The school bus will be here in 20 minutes. Marcus sat up, wincing. School? Already? Kids need routine, Linda said, her nurse's training showing. Especially after trauma. Sarah emerged from the bathroom in clothes donated by the Red Cross. The jeans were too short, the sweater too big. I look ridiculous. You look fine, Linda assured her. Angela, twins, let's move it. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Marcus got up to answer it, finding Harrison in a fresh suit, looking like he'd actually slept. Good morning, Johnson family. He held up a stack of shopping bags. I thought some proper clothes might help. The girls' eyes lit up as Harrison distributed the bags. New jeans, shirts, shoes, all in the right sizes. How did you know? Linda started. I had my assistant check the sizes on the clothes you were wearing during evacuation. Harrison straightened his tie. There's more being delivered later. Essentials, school supplies. Marcus felt his pride stick in his throat. Mr. Harrison, we can't. Please. Harrison cut him off. Consider it in advance on your first paycheck. Marcus stared at him. I haven't accepted the job yet. Dad, Sarah said, already changing into new jeans that actually fit. Maybe we should talk about that. Harrison checked his watch. The school bus will be here soon. Why don't we let the girls get ready, and you and I can discuss terms over coffee? Linda gave Marcus a look that clearly said go. He nodded, following Harrison out of the room. The hotel's coffee shop was quiet, most of the Pine Street families having already left for work or school. Harrison ordered them both expensive coffees Marcus couldn't pronounce. Your burns healing okay? Harrison asked. Fine. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. About the job. Let me lay it out clearly. Harrison interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. Full benefits. Starting salary 3 times what you made at Pine Street. Company vehicle. And this. He opened the folder to reveal photos of an apartment building in Berkeley. Modern, clean, safe. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Walking distance to better schools. Rent controlled, part of the employee housing program. Marcus's hand shook as he looked at the photos. Berkeley? Your girls are smart, Mr. Johnson. They deserve better schools. Better opportunities. Our whole life is in Oakland. Harrison leaned back. Is it? A maintenance job that barely paid the bills? An apartment that nearly killed your family? What exactly are you holding on to? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of Sarah's 2 short jeans, of Maya's nightmares, of Linda working double shifts at the hospital. Pride, he said finally. I'm holding on to pride. Harrison nodded slowly. Pride's important, but so is knowing when to put it aside for something better. He pulled out another document. This is the preliminary report from the fire department. Want to know how close it really was that night? Marcus looked at the report, at words like critical gas levels and imminent catastrophic failure. 3 minutes, Harrison said quietly. If I hadn't been there checking the building that night, if you hadn't smelled the gas when you did, 3 minutes later, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Marcus pushed the report away, feeling sick. Why were you there that night? Because I've been trying to buy that building for months, warning the owners about safety violations. They ignored me, just like they ignored you. Harrison's face hardened. I'm in the business of fixing broken things, Mr. Johnson. Buildings, systems, lives. Let me help fix this. Outside the coffee shop, the school bus was loading. Marcus watched his daughters board, wearing their new clothes, carrying new backpacks. Linda stood on the sidewalk, waving until the bus pulled away. My wife, Marcus said, she works at Highland Hospital. I know. I've already spoken with their HR department. They have positions open at Alta Bates in Berkeley. Better pay, better hours. Marcus looked at him sharply. You did what? I made a call. That's all. The decision is hers. Harrison pushed the folder closer. Just like this decision is yours. Linda entered the coffee shop, sitting beside Marcus. Girls are off to school. Maya only cried a little. Mrs. Johnson, Harrison said, what do you think about Berkeley? Linda's eyes widened slightly. Berkeley? Marcus showed her the apartment photos. Watched her face as she took in the modern kitchen, the safe neighborhood, the proximity to better schools. The hospital there, she said slowly, Alta Bates. They have an excellent pediatric unit. They're hiring, Harrison added. Linda looked at Marcus, 20 years of marriage allowing them to communicate without words. She saw his pride, his fear, his hope. He saw her exhaustion, her dreams for their girls, her trust in him. Marcus, she said softly, maybe it's time. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the city was fully awake now. Traffic building, people hurrying to jobs and schools. Normal life, continuing while their world had stopped and restarted. The paperwork's ready, Harrison said. But I want you both to really think about this. Talk it over. Sleep on it? No, Marcus said. Harrison's face fell slightly. I understand. Well, the hotel room is still. No, Marcus interrupted. I mean, no more waiting. No more thinking it over. He looked at Linda, who squeezed his hand. Where do I sign? Harrison's smile was genuine as he pulled out a contract. Welcome to Harrison Development Group, Mr. Johnson. As Marcus signed his name, he felt something shift inside him. The same feeling he'd had watching Pine Street burn. Not an ending, but a transformation. There's one condition, he said, handing the pen back. Name it. The other families from Pine Street. They need help too. Harrison nodded. Already working on it. Part of your first project will be helping relocate them. Actually, your knowledge of the community will be invaluable. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. When can we see the apartment? Today, if you'd like. My driver can take us now. Marcus stood as Burns protesting the movement. But the pain felt different now. Not just a reminder of what they'd lost, but a marker of where they'd been, of how far they had to go. Mr. Harrison, he said, why me? Really? Harrison stood too, straightening his ever-present tie. Because in all my years in this business, I've learned one thing. You can teach skills, but you can't teach character. And running back into that building for a family photo, he shook his head. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. They left the coffee shop together, stepping into the bright morning light. The Marriott stood tall behind them, a temporary shelter in the storm of their lives. Ahead, through the windshield of Harrison's luxury car, Berkeley waited. Marcus touched the photo in his pocket, now in a new frame Harrison's assistant had found. His parents smiled up at him, and for the first time since the fire, their smiles didn't bring pain. They would be proud, he realized, not of the maintenance man he'd been, but of the father he was. The father who knew when to let go of pride and grab hold of hope instead. "Ready?" Linda asked, squeezing his hand. Marcus nodded, watching Oakland recede in the rearview mirror. "Ready?" The Berkeley apartment felt too big, too clean, too quiet. After a week of living there, Marcus still woke up disoriented, reaching for walls that weren't where they used to be. The girls had their own rooms now, Sarah and Angela sharing one, the twins in another, and Maya getting the small bonus room that was barely bigger than a closet but was all hers. "Dad!" Sarah stood in his bedroom doorway, already dressed for school in her new uniform. The sink's making weird noises again. Marcus grabbed his tool belt out of habit, then stopped. "Call the building maintenance. That's what they're here for. But you could fix it faster. That's not my job anymore." He set the tool belt down. "I start orientation at Harrison Development today." Sarah lingered in the doorway. "Do you miss it? Fixing things?" Before Marcus could answer, Linda called from the kitchen. "Girls, breakfast." The kitchen still smelled new, like fresh paint and unused appliances. Linda had made eggs and toast, setting plates at the actual dining table, a luxury they'd never had space for before. "Maya, eat your eggs," Linda said, adjusting her new hospital scrubs. "First day at all debates. Everyone needs to be on time." Marcus watched his family eat breakfast, all in new clothes, all headed to new places. The twins chatted about their advanced math class. Angela complained about the uniform skirt length. Maya pushed her eggs around her plate, quieter than usual. His phone buzzed, a text from Harrison. "Car will pick you up in 30. Ready for day one?" The doorbell rang before he could reply. Marcus opened it to find Mrs. Rodriguez on their doorstep, still in her housekeeping uniform from the night shift. "Mr. Johnson, perdón, but they're saying we have to leave the hotel by Friday. The insurance money." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Come in, Mrs. Rodriguez. Let me make some calls." Linda gave Mrs. Rodriguez her untouched breakfast and herded the girls toward the door. "School bus will be here soon." "Maya, eggs. Now." Marcus pulled out the folder of housing applications he'd been working on. "Harrison's team is processing everyone's paperwork. Let me check your status." Mrs. Rodriguez sat at their new table, looking out of place among the modern furnishings. "Your new home, it's very nice." "It's different," Marcus said, dialing Harrison's office. "But we're adjusting." The phone rang twice before Harrison's assistant answered. "Mr. Johnson, Mr. Harrison is expecting you. Maria Rodriguez's housing application." "What's the status?" Papers shuffled on the other end. "Still pending approval." "The income requirements." She's been a housekeeper at the Hilton for 15 years. Her daughter's in college. "They need an answer before Friday." "Mr. Johnson, there are procedures. There are people." Marcus cut in, his voice rising. "Real people who lost everything. The procedures can wait." The line went quiet for a moment. "I'll have Mr. Harrison call you back." Marcus hung up, turning to Mrs. Rodriguez. "We'll figure this out. I promise." She nodded, but her eyes were tired, defeated. "Gracias, Mr. Johnson. You always try to fix everything." After she left, Marcus stood in his new kitchen, staring at his reflection in the spotless appliances. His work clothes felt wrong, dress shirt and slacks instead of his maintenance uniform. His phone buzzed again. "Harrison, heard about Rodriguez. We'll discuss when you get here." Cars waiting downstairs. The driver opened the car door for Marcus, something he wasn't sure he'd ever get used to. The drive to Harrison Development Group's downtown office took 20 minutes, each mile carrying him further from the life he'd known. The building lobby was all glass and steel, a far cry from Pine Street's crumbling concrete. The security guard checked his temporary ID, directing him to the elevators. 14th floor, the guard said. "They're waiting for you." The elevator was mirrored, forcing Marcus to look at himself. The burns on his back had healed enough to stop bandaging, but he still felt them. Still smelled the gas sometimes. In his dreams, Harrison met him at the elevator. Welcome to day one. But first, let's talk about Maria Rodriguez. They walked through an open office space, past cubicles and conference rooms, to Harrison's corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the bay. Sit. Harrison gestured to a leather chair. Coffee. What's happening with Mrs. Rodriguez's application? Harrison sighed, sitting behind his desk. Income requirements are strict for the Berkeley properties. But he held up a hand as Marcus started to protest. I think I found a solution. There's a building in Oakland, newly renovated. Better neighborhood than Pine Street, still affordable. She needs an answer by Friday. She'll have one today, along with moving assistance. Harrison leaned forward. Marcus, I know you want to help everyone. That's why I hired you. But you can't fix everything at once. They're my responsibility. They were your responsibility when the management company ignored your maintenance requests. When they cut corners and risked lives. Harrison pushed a file across the desk. Speaking of which, look at these. Marcus opened the file. Photos of Pine Street's infrastructure, gas lines, electrical systems, support beams, all in worse condition than even he had known. Fire marshal's full report came in, Harrison said. It's worse than we thought. The gas leak was just the final straw. That building was a death trap. Marcus's hands shook as he looked at the photos. I should have known. Should have checked more thoroughly. Stop. Harrison's voice was sharp. You did everything you could with what you had. But now, he gestured to the office around them. Now you have more. Real resources, real power to make changes. A knock at the door interrupted them. Harrison's assistant entered with more files. The rest of the Pine Street applications, she said. And the contractors are ready for the site inspection whenever you are, Mr. Johnson. Marcus looked up. Site inspection? Harrison smiled slightly. Your first official task. We're documenting everything. Every violation. Every ignored repair. Every risk. The management company needs to be held accountable. They'll try to blame me, Marcus said quietly. The maintenance man who didn't maintain things properly. Let them try. Harrison's smile turned hard. We have 20 families who'll testify otherwise. Plus these. He tapped Marcus's phone screen, showing dozens of emails. Every maintenance request you submitted. Every warning you sent. All ignored. Marcus stared at the emails, remembering each one. The leaky pipes in 2B. The electrical issues in 4A. The mold in the basement. All band-aided, never properly fixed. When do we start? Now. Harrison stood. Cars waiting to take us to Pine Street. Time to face it all one last time. The drive back to Oakland was quiet. Marcus watched the city change around them. The clean streets of downtown Berkeley giving way to the familiar grit of his old neighborhood. Pine Street housing complex looked smaller somehow, its burnout shell cordoned off with police tape. A small memorial of flowers and photos had appeared on the fence, faces of the community that had lived there. Ready? Harrison asked as they parked. Marcus touched the photo in his pocket. A habit now, a reminder. Yeah, ready to make it right. They spent hours documenting everything. Every crack, every patch job, every hidden danger. Marcus pointed out where he'd beg for repairs, where he'd improvise solutions, where he'd lay awake at night worrying. Near the end, in what was left of his old apartment, Marcus found Maya's drawing still stuck to the fridge, somehow surviving the explosion. A family portrait, all stick figures holding hands. Mr. Johnson? Harrison called from the hallway. Found something you should see. In the basement, Harrison's flashlight illuminated the gas main. Its corroded pipes, its failed safety valves, its decades of neglect. 3 minutes, Marcus whispered, remembering Harrison's words from the coffee shop. We were 3 minutes away from... But you weren't, Harrison cut in. You got them out? All of them. And now? He handed Marcus a clipboard. Now you make sure it never happens again. Marcus took the clipboard, his maintenance man's hands holding the power to make real change. In his pocket, his parents smiled from their photo, and somewhere across the city, his family waited in their new home. One last thing, Harrison said as they left the building. Mrs. Rodriguez? She's approved. My assistant's calling her now. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Above them, The sky was California clear, the same sky that had witnessed their escape a week ago. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a beginning. "Let's go," he said finally. "There's work to do." Marcus stood in front of the mirror in his new bedroom, adjusting a tie he still wasn't used to wearing. His hands, callous from years of maintenance work, fumbled with the silk material. "Here, let me," Linda said, coming up behind him. She turned him around, fixing the tie with practiced movements. "First day jitters?" Something like that. He watched her hands work, remembering how she used to straighten his maintenance uniform the same way. "How was your first week at Alda Bates?" "Different. Better equipment, better staffing. The pediatric unit is—" She smiled, patting his chest. "It's where I should have been years ago." The sounds of their daughters getting ready for school filtered through the apartment. The twins arguing over bathroom time. Angela complaining about her uniform shoes. Sarah helping Maya with her hair. "Dad!" Maya's voice carried from the kitchen. "The toaster's broken." Marcus started to move, then stopped himself. "Call maintenance, baby. Remember? But you can fix it." "Maya," Linda called back, "let your father finish getting ready. He has a big day." Marcus checked his reflection one last time. The tie was perfect now. The new suit fit well, but his eyes still held uncertainty. "You look like a boss," Sarah said from the doorway, Maya beside her with unfinished toast. "I'm not a boss," Marcus corrected. "Just a project manager." "For now," Linda whispered, kissing his cheek. The doorbell rang, Harrison's driver, right on time. Marcus grabbed his new briefcase, still stiff with disuse. "Everybody ready?" he asked, looking at his family. The girls were in their Berkeley school uniforms, Linda in her Alta Bates scrubs. All of them looking somehow different in this new life. They rode the elevator down together, separating in the lobby, the girls to their school bus stop, Linda to her carpool, Marcus to the waiting town car. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," the driver said, opening the door. The drive to Harrison Development Group was becoming familiar now. Marcus watched the city wake up around them, so different from his old morning commute to Pine Street. His phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. "Staff meeting 9 a.m. Your team's eager to meet you." "My team," Marcus thought. The words still felt foreign. The office was already bustling when he arrived. People nodded to him, some he recognized from orientation last week. Harrison met him at his new office. Not a corner suite like Harrison's, but still bigger than his entire maintenance workspace had been. "Ready to meet your team?" Harrison asked. Before Marcus could answer, voices approached from the hallway. Four people entered, carrying laptops and coffee cups. Marcus Johnson, Harrison began the introductions. "Meet your project team. Lisa Chun, Structural Engineering. James Cooper, City Planning and Permits. Rachel Martinez, Community Relations. And David Park, Architectural Design." They all looked young, educated, capable. Marcus felt his hands sweating. "Mr. Johnson," Lisa stepped forward, "we've reviewed your documentation from Pine Street. The structural issues you identified, they're exactly what we need to prevent in future projects. The community input is invaluable," Rachel added. "We've already started outreach programs based on your recommendations." Harrison smiled slightly. "I'll leave you to it. Meeting in an hour to discuss the Rodriguez transition and other Pine Street families." After Harrison left, Marcus sat behind his desk, his team taking seats around the office. "So," James opened his laptop. "Where do we start?" Marcus pulled out the photo from his pocket. Not his parents this time, but the one he'd taken at Pine Street during the inspection. "We start with the truth. Show me every building in Oakland with similar structural issues." The team worked together smoothly, each bringing their expertise. Lisa pointed out common structural failures. James pulled up city records of violations. Rachel had data on affected communities. David sketched renovation possibilities. By lunchtime, Marcus's head was spinning with information, but something felt right. His hands might not be fixing pipes anymore, but they were fixing bigger problems. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Maya got an A on her math test." Then another from Linda. "Just assisted in my first surgery here. Amazing equipment." Then from the twins, a selfie in their new science lab. Harrison appeared in his doorway. "Lunch? We should discuss the Rodriguez situation." They walked to a nearby restaurant, the kind Marcus would never have entered in his maintenance uniform. But Harrison ordered burgers and fries, making it feel less intimidating. Mrs. Rodriguez moves in tomorrow, Harrison said. The Oakland property worked out better than expected. 7 other Pine Street families are already approved for units there. And the others? Working on it? Your team's recommendations are helping streamline the process. Harrison took a bite of his burger. Speaking of your team, how's it going? Marcus considered the question. They know things I don't. College things, technical things. But they don't know what it's like. Living in those buildings, working in them, raising kids in them. Harrison nodded. Exactly why they need you. Knowledge isn't just degrees, Marcus. It's experience. It's understanding. After lunch, Marcus led his first official team meeting. They gathered in a conference room, spreading out blueprints and data. These buildings, Marcus pointed to a map, they're all one disaster away from what happened at Pine Street. We need to identify them, document everything, and make a plan. The owners won't like it, James warned. They'll fight inspections. Marcus thought of the gas leak, of his daughters running from the explosion, of 20 families in a hotel wondering about their future. Let them fight, he said. We have something they don't. What's that? Rachel asked. The truth, and people's lives at stake. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and plans. By 5 o'clock, Marcus had authorized his first inspection schedule, approved 2 renovation proposals, and signed off on housing applications for 3 more Pine Street families. The driver was waiting when he finished. Home, Mr. Johnson? Home. The word still felt new. The apartment was alive when he arrived. The girls were doing homework at the dining table. Linda was cooking in the kitchen that still smelled too new. Dad! Maya ran to him. Look at my math test. He picked her up, looking at the A marked in red. That's my girl. The toaster's still broken, she added. Marcus laughed. Did you call maintenance? Yeah, they're coming tomorrow. She wrinkled her nose. But you could fix it faster. I fix different things now, baby. He set her down, loosening his tie. Bigger things. Sarah looked up from her homework. Like Mrs. Rodriguez's new apartment? How did you know about that? She called. Said to tell you thank you. Linda appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Good first day? Marcus looked around at his family. All of them somehow stronger, somehow more themselves in this new life. He thought of his team at work, of the plans they'd made, of the changes they could create. Yeah, he said, pulling the Pine Street photo from his pocket and setting it beside his parents' photo on the mantel. A good first day? That night, after the girls were in bed, Marcus stood at their apartment window. Berkeley spread out below, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Mrs. Rodriguez was packing for her move. Somewhere, other families were waiting for their chance at something better. His phone buzzed one last time. Harrison, ready for tomorrow? Marcus looked at his reflection in the window. The tie was gone, the suit jacket hung up, but he looked different somehow. Stronger like his family. Ready like his team. He texted back, ready? The conference room at Harrison Development Group was packed. 20 families from Pine Street sat in chairs that probably cost more than their old monthly rent. All eyes on Marcus as he stood at the front beside Harrison and a team of lawyers. The management company wants to settle, Harrison announced. They're offering compensation to each family. Mrs. Rodriguez raised her hand. How much? One of the lawyers slid papers across the table. Marcus watched faces fall as they read the numbers. That's nothing, someone called out. We lost everything. Marcus cleared his throat. That's why we're not taking it. The room went quiet. Harrison nodded for him to continue. Look, Marcus said, loosening his tie slightly. I know what they're offering seems like a lot when you're living in hotels and temporary housing. But it's not just about money. It's about responsibility. Accountability. He pulled up photos on the screen behind him. The corroded gas lines, the failed safety systems, the years of neglected maintenance requests. They knew, he continued. Every time I submitted a repair request, every time I warned them about safety issues. They knew, and they did nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes. My granddaughter was visiting that night. She could have. Exactly. Marcus looked around the room, at faces he'd known for years. Our kids could have died. We all could have died. 3 minutes earlier or later. He swallowed hard. They need to face consequences. Harrison stepped forward. The law firm believes we have a strong case for criminal negligence. It will take longer than accepting the settlement, but we'll wait, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. Others nodded in agreement. After the meeting, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the photo of his parents. His phone buzzed, Linda reminding him about Maya's school play tonight. A knock at his door made him look up. Harrison entered, followed by the lead lawyer. That went well, Harrison said. You've got them united. They trust you, the lawyer added. Your testimony will be crucial when another knock interrupted them. Marcus's team, Lisa, James, Rachel, and David, filed in. Sorry, Lisa said, but you need to see this. She opened her laptop, showing a news article. The management company's CEO was giving a press conference, claiming they'd been unaware of safety issues at Pine Street. They're lying, Marcus growled. We know, Rachel said, and we can prove it. James spread out documents on Marcus's desk. Every maintenance request you filed, every inspection report, every budget cut. We found them all. Plus, David added, 3 other properties they own with similar violations. It's a pattern. Marcus looked at the evidence of years of negligence laid out before him. His hands itched to fix things like they always did. But this wasn't about fixing pipes anymore. This was about fixing a broken system. When's the next court date? He asked the lawyer. 2 weeks. But Marcus, they'll come after you. Try to discredit you. Claim you didn't do your job properly. Let them try. Marcus stood, straightening his tie. I have 20 families who know the truth. And now, proof to back it up. His phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah. Don't forget Maya's play. Go, Harrison said, seeing the message. Family first. We'll handle this. The drive home felt longer than usual. Marcus's mind raced with court dates and evidence files, but as Berkeley appeared on the horizon, his thoughts shifted to his daughter on stage. The apartment was chaos when he arrived. Linda was trying to fix Maya's costume, while the other girls offered conflicting advice. Daddy, Maya ran to him, her angel wings askew. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, baby. He knelt to straighten her wings. Ready to shine? The school auditorium was nothing like their old one. Clean, well-lit, with working air conditioning. Marcus sat with Linda and the girls, watching Maya deliver her lines perfectly. She's so different here, Linda whispered. All of them are. She was right. The twins had joined the science club. Angela was taking art classes. Sarah was talking about college, real college, not just community college like before. After the play, they celebrated at a local pizza place. Maya couldn't stop talking about her performance. The twins argued about their science project, and Sarah showed Angela photos from her college tour. Dad? Maya asked suddenly. Do you miss fixing things? Marcus looked at his daughter, then at his family. I still fix things, baby. Just different things now. His phone buzzed. Harrison sending updates about the case. But for once, Marcus didn't check it immediately. Instead, he ordered another pizza and listened to his daughter's stories. That night, after everyone was asleep, Marcus sat in the living room with the case file spread around him. The photo of Pine Street burning sat next to his parents' photo, 2 moments that had changed everything. Linda found him there, bringing 2 cups of tea. Can't sleep? She asked, sitting beside him. Thinking about the case. About Pine Street. She picked up one of the maintenance request forms. You did everything you could. Did I? Maybe if I'd pushed harder, documented more. Marcus. Linda took his hand. You kept that building running with nothing but determination and duct tape for years. You saved lives that night. And now, she gestured to the files. Now you're saving more. He squeezed her hand. How's the hospital? Good. Different. She smiled. Better. Like everything else. A noise from the hallway made them look up. Sarah stood there in her pajamas. Sorry, she said. Couldn't sleep either. Come here. Marcus patted the couch. Sarah sat between them, looking at the files. Is that from before? From Pine Street? Yeah. Evidence for the case. She picked up a photo of their old apartment. Remember when the twins tried to fix the sink themselves? Marcus laughed. Water everywhere. Took hours to clean up, but you showed them how to do it properly after. Sarah leaned against him. That's what you're doing now, isn't it? Showing people how to fix things properly. Linda kissed Sarah's head. When did you get so wise? Must be the Berkeley air, Sarah joked. They sat together, looking at pieces of their old life spread out before them. But it didn't hurt like before. The memories were transforming like they had. "Dad?" Sarah asked softly. "Are we going to win?" "The case." Marcus thought about the evidence, about 20 families united, about Harrison's resources behind them. "Yeah, baby. We're going to win." His phone buzzed again. Another update from Harrison. But Marcus left it on the table. Tonight was for family, for healing, for remembering that sometimes breaking things was the first step to fixing them properly. Outside, Berkeley slept under a clear sky. Somewhere in Oakland, Pine Street stood empty, waiting for justice. And here, in this new home, Marcus Johnson sat with his wife and daughter, planning how to make things right. Not just with tools and repairs anymore, but with truth and change. Not just fixing pipes, but fixing lives. Not just surviving, but rising. Rising from ashes, stronger than before. 1 month after the Pine Street explosion, Marcus stood in a courtroom, straightening his tie one last time before taking the stand. The management company's lawyers watched him like hawks as he was sworn in. "Mr. Johnson," the prosecutor began, "how long did you work as maintenance supervisor at Pine Street Housing Complex?" 7 years, Marcus answered, his voice steady. "And during that time, how many maintenance requests did you submit regarding gas line issues?" Marcus looked at the jury. 173 documented requests, plus verbal warnings almost weekly. The defense lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation about verbal." "I kept the log," Marcus interrupted. "Dates, times, who I spoke to. Everything." The judge nodded. "Continue." For 2 hours, Marcus detailed every ignored request, every patch job, every sleepless night worrying about his residents. His family sat in the gallery. Linda, Sarah, Angela, the twins, and Maya, all watching their father fight with words instead of tools. And on the night of the explosion, the prosecutor asked, "What made you check the gas levels?" "My daughter Sarah noticed the smell first." "But—" Marcus paused, touching his pocket where his parents' photo sat. "But I knew that smell. From when I was a kid. From the fire that killed my parents." The courtroom was silent. If Mr. Harrison hadn't been there that night, if we'd waited even 3 minutes longer, Marcus looked directly at the management company executives. 20 families, children, elderly, all gone. The defense tried to shake his testimony, to suggest he'd been negligent in his duties. But Marcus had evidence for everything: photos, logs, emails, witness statements. By the time he stepped down, even the defense lawyers looked defeated. Outside the courthouse, Harrison waited with Marcus's team. "You did good," Harrison said. "Really good?" Lisa handed Marcus a tablet. "The news is already reporting. They're calling it a landmark case for housing safety. The other properties we identified," James added, "their owners are suddenly very interested in renovations." Rachel smiled. Amazing what the threat of criminal charges can do. Marcus's phone buzzed. Linda reminding him about dinner. Today was special, not just because of the trial, but because— "Go," Harrison said. "Be with your family. We'll handle things here." The Berkeley apartment was full of noise when Marcus arrived. The twins were setting the table with their best dishes, a housewarming gift from Harrison. Angela and Sarah were hanging streamers. Maya was supervising from the couch, still recovering from a cold. "Daddy!" Maya ran to him. "Did you win? Did the bad guys go to jail?" Marcus picked her up. "Not yet, baby. But we're getting there." Linda emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands. "How did it go?" "Good. Really good." He kissed her. "They didn't expect us to have so much evidence." "That's my organized man." She touched his tie, the same one she'd fixed on his first day at Harrison Development. "Now go change. Everyone will be here soon." Everyone started arriving 30 minutes later. Mrs. Rodriguez came first, bringing her famous empanadas. Then other Pine Street families, each carrying dishes and stories and hope. Harrison arrived last, looking almost casual, without his usual suit jacket. "Nice place," he said, looking around the apartment. "Feels like home now." It did. Photos covered the walls, not just the old ones of Marcus's parents in Pine Street, but new ones. The girls in their school uniforms, Linda in her hospital scrubs, Marcus with his team at Harrison Development. A community rebuilding itself. Everyone, Marcus called out, tapping his glass. The room quieted. Thank you for coming tonight. 1 month ago, we lost our homes. But we found something too. He looked at his family, at his neighbors who had become family. We found strength. We found justice. We found a way to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. Mrs. Rodriguez wiped her eyes. Because of you, Mr. Johnson. No, Marcus shook his head. Because of us. All of us. Harrison stepped forward. Which is why I have an announcement. The Pine Street property? We won the bid today. And the first thing we're going to build there is affordable housing. Safe housing. Done right this time. The room erupted in cheers. Linda squeezed Marcus's hand. But, Harrison continued, we need someone to oversee it. Someone who knows what really matters in a home. Marcus? Marcus looked at his old neighbors, his new colleagues, his forever family. Yes, he said simply. Later, after the food was eaten and the stories shared, after the last guest left and the girls were in bed, Marcus stood at the window with Linda. Happy? She asked. He pulled her close. Different kind of happy. Better. His phone buzzed, a text from the prosecutor. The management company wanted to talk settlement again. A real settlement this time. Look, Linda pointed out the window. The sun was setting over Berkeley, painting the sky in colors that reminded Marcus of fire. But not the destructive kind anymore. The kind that forged things stronger. Sarah appeared beside them. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Remember when you ran back into Pine Street? For the photo? Marcus touched his pocket where the photo still lived. Yeah. Were you scared? Terrified, he admitted. But sometimes the scariest moments lead us where we need to go. Sarah hugged him. I'm proud of you, Dad. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. We all are. Marcus held his wife and daughter, watching the sunset fade. In their bedrooms, the twins whispered about their science project. Angela sketched in her new art book, and Maya hummed herself to sleep. His phone buzzed again. Harrison sending the preliminary plans for the new Pine Street development. Tomorrow, Marcus would review them with his team. Tomorrow, they would continue fixing what was broken. But tonight, in this moment, everything was already fixed. Dad? Sarah asked softly. Tell me about Grandma and Grandpa again. Marcus took the photo from his pocket. Worn edges, cracked glass, endless love. They were fixers too, he said. Just like us. Outside, Berkeley settled into night. Somewhere in Oakland, Pine Street waited for its rebirth. And here, in a home that finally felt like home, Marcus Johnson held his family close and knew that sometimes the best fixes weren't about tools or buildings at all. They were about courage, about change, about running back into burning buildings for the things that matter most. They were about family, about rising, about love. Maya's voice drifted from her bedroom, singing the song from her school play. Linda hummed along. Sarah rested her head on Marcus's shoulder. And Marcus? Marcus smiled, putting the photo back in his pocket. He didn't need it as much anymore. Not when he had this moment, this life, this love. Not when he had finally fixed everything that truly needed fixing. Dad? Maya called out. Can you tuck me in? Marcus kissed Linda and Sarah goodnight, heading to his youngest daughter's room. Some things hadn't changed. Some things never would. And that, he realized, was the best fix of all.